I was lying on the side of the road, glass scattered around me, the smell of burnt rubber clinging to the night air, when I heard the paramedic's voice cut through the chaos. "We've called your family. Someone will be here soon." Those words gave me a strange kind of comfort, like maybe I wouldn't have to face the darkness of that moment alone. My hands were shaking, blood dripping from a gash on my forehead, and every time I tried to move, my ribs screamed back at me. The flashing red and blue lights painted the wet asphalt, and strangers slowed their cars just long enough to stare, before driving on. Minutes crawled by. 10 minutes, 20. Every time an engine sounded in the distance, I turned my head expecting to see a familiar car pulling over, a face leaning out, someone yelling my name. But nothing. Only the paramedics. Checking vitals, the officer writing notes, the hum of radios. "Are you sure they know?" I asked finally, my voice catching. The paramedic nodded gently, eyes full of pity. "We called both numbers you gave us. They said they were on their way." I wanted to believe it. I told myself maybe they hit traffic, maybe they were just trying to find the right exit. Maybe they were panicking, and it was taking them longer than it should. But as the hour stretched and the pain in my chest deepened, something colder than the night settled over me. An hour had passed, and still, nobody came. Not my mother, not my father, not even my sister. The people who always preached about family, loyalty, sticking together, had vanished the moment I needed them most. I stared up at the dark sky, the weight of betrayal pressing heavier on me than my broken body. And in that moment, as the paramedic squeezed my hand and said softly, "We'll take care of you," I knew something inside me had snapped. This wasn't just an accident on the road. This was the beginning of something else, a truth I couldn't ignore anymore. My family had already abandoned me long before my car hit that tree. The hospital lights were blinding, sterile, and cold, but not half as cold as the silence from my phone. I lay in that bed, hooked up to wires and monitors, my body aching with every shallow breath, and I kept checking the screen for a message, a missed call, anything that would prove I was wrong about them. Nothing. Not even a half-hearted "R. You okay?" from the people who were supposed to care the most. Instead, it was my coworker, someone I barely spoke to outside the office, who showed up 2 hours later with a plastic bag of bottled water and crackers from the gift shop. She had heard about the crash through a mutual friend. She looked more shocked than I was that no one from my family had appeared. "They didn't come? Not even one of them?" she whispered, her voice almost breaking. I forced a laugh, though it hurt my chest. "Guess they had better things to do." But inside, shame and anger twisted together until I could barely breathe. All the times I had driven hours to babysit my sister's kids, all the times I'd lent money I didn't have to my father for his endless projects, all the times I had let my mother's sharp words cut into me without fighting back. I thought, those sacrifices meant something. I thought they added up to loyalty, to proof that when it mattered, they would show up for me. Lying there, I realized I had been nothing more than a convenience, a placeholder in their lives, a background character, who could be ignored when the scene grew too heavy. And as my coworker sat awkwardly by my bed, fumbling with the crinkly wrapper of a granola bar, I promised myself that when I got out of that hospital, the way I dealt with my family would never be the same again. The next morning, the nurse wheeled. In my breakfast tray, bland oatmeal and a plastic cup of orange juice, and I stared at it while my phone buzzed on the table. My heart leapt, thinking maybe finally it was my mom or dad checking in. But when I reached for it, I saw only another message from my coworker. "Let me know if you need anything. I can stop by after work." My family side of the screen was still empty, as if I didn't exist. Hours dragged into the afternoon, and when the doctor came to explain my fractured ribs and concussion, he paused and asked gently, "Do you have anyone to take you home when you're discharged?" I opened my mouth, then closed it, heat rising to my face. I lied. Yes, my family will pick me up. Because admitting the truth that no one would show was more humiliating than the pain in my chest. That night, while the machines beeped softly and the hallway echoed with nurses' footsteps, I scrolled through old text threads with my parents. Messages where they'd asked for favors, money, rides, my time, things I'd given without hesitation. I thought about every holiday I'd hosted, every birthday gift I'd carefully chosen, every moment I had stepped in to make their lives easier. And now, when it was my turn to need even a sliver of that care, the silence was deafening. It was then, lying awake in that sterile room, that a different kind of clarity struck me. They hadn't just failed me that night. They had shown me exactly where I stood in their lives, on the outside, expendable, a name in their phones they didn't bother answering. And once I truly accepted that, I felt something shift inside me. The pain of my broken ribs was nothing compared to the fire building in my chest. Because when I walked out of that hospital, I wasn't going to beg for their attention ever again. I was going to make sure they understood what it felt like to be left behind. 2 days later, when the nurse finally handed me my discharge papers, I walked out of that hospital with a slow, steady determination burning inside me. My side ached with every step, but I refused to ask for a wheelchair. I clutched the small plastic bag of prescriptions and personal belongings and waited on the curb, pretending someone was coming to pick me up. But as the minutes stretched and cars pulled up for other patients, it became obvious. No one was coming for me. I pulled out my phone and called a cab. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror when I slid into the back seat, bandages still wrapped around my forehead. "Rough week?" he asked gently. I almost laughed. "You could say that." When we pulled up to my apartment, the lights were all off. The place felt colder than usual, as though it knew I was returning alone. I lowered myself onto the couch and sat in the silence, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. My phone lit up suddenly, and for a split second my heart clenched, but it wasn't family. It was a group chat, photos of my sister and parents. Out at a restaurant, smiling, drinks raised, celebrating something I wasn't even invited to. My stomach turned. They had known where I was, what had happened, and still they chose to carry on without me as though I didn't exist. That was the moment I decided. No more excuses for them, no more bending until I broke. If family meant being used until you were empty and then discarded the second you asked for support, then I wanted no part of it. I opened my laptop, pulled up old receipts, texts, even bank statements. All the favors, all the money, all the ways I had propped them up when they needed me. I started compiling it all, line by line, because if they could abandon me at my lowest, I was going to show them exactly what it meant to cut me out. And this time, I wasn't coming back. By the end of that week, I had built a folder thick with proof of everything I had ever done for them. Transfers to cover my father's debts, receipts for the times I bought groceries for my mother when she claimed she forgot her wallet, screenshots of my sister begging me to babysit and then vanishing without so much as a thank you. It was all there, a decade of evidence showing I had been their silent safety net. The more I scrolled through it, the clearer the pattern became. Every message from them was a request, every interaction a demand, every connection conditional on what I could provide. And when the roles reversed, when I was broken, bleeding, waiting, they chose absence. I sat at my desk, my ribs still tender, and typed out a single email addressed to all three of them. I didn't write with anger. My words were calm, factual, measured, almost clinical. I listed the moments, the amounts, the hours, the sacrifices, and then I wrote the truth. I needed you once. You didn't come. This is the last time you'll ever have the chance. I attached the folder, hit send, and closed my laptop. For the first time in years, I felt a strange lightness in my chest, a release. That night, instead of waiting for a call that would never come, I planned something different. I drafted new boundaries like terms in a contract. No more loans, no more babysitting, no more covering emergencies, and then I made it official. I blocked them all. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was freedom. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop with numbers I knew by heart, but I didn't answer. I watched their names flash across the screen, Mom, Dad, my sister, and then disappear into voicemail. By the afternoon, my inbox was filling with long emails, paragraphs of guilt, and half-baked excuses. My father wrote that he hadn't realized how serious the accident was. My mother insisted she thought the others were going. My sister tried the soft approach. "You know we love you. We just got caught up. Don't be dramatic." Each word only hardened me more, because if they had cared, they would have come that night, no explanations required. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded every one of their messages into the same folder, building my archive of evidence, proof not just of what they had done, but of how they twisted the truth afterward. That evening, as I made myself dinner for one, I set the phone face down on the counter and felt an odd calm settle over me. For the first time, I wasn't anxiously waiting for their approval or terrified of their disappointment. I was simply existing without them, and the world hadn't collapsed. If anything, it felt sturdier. Still, I knew this wasn't over. People like them didn't let go easily, and I was ready, because the girl who had once dropped everything to rush to their side was gone. In her place stood someone new, someone who had survived being abandoned on the roadside and had no intention of ever being that helpless again. A week later, the first real confrontation came. My sister showed. Up at my door unannounced, her kids tugging at her hands, her voice pitched high with fake cheer. "We thought we'd check on you," she said, as though she hadn't ignored me for days when I was laid out in a hospital bed. I stood there in the doorway, ribs still aching under my sweatshirt, and let her words hang in the air. She shifted, nervously, then got to her real point. "Listen, Mom and Dad are upset. They said you sent some kind of file, and now Dad's worried you're going to, make things public. You wouldn't do that to us, right?" Her eyes darted to the side like they always did when she was caught. The old me would have caved right then, reassured her, cleaned up the mess. But not this time. I leaned on the doorframe and spoke calmly, almost softly. "You left me on the road. You all did. That file is just the truth. If it bothers you, maybe ask yourself why." She flushed red, muttered something about me being dramatic, and tried to guilt me. "We're family. You can't just cut us out." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Family is supposed to show up. You didn't. That's all I needed to know. Then I closed the door on her shocked face, the sound of the latch clicking louder than any argument we'd ever had. My hands shook afterward, but not from fear, from power. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over them, and I wasn't going back. A few days later, my mother called from a blocked number, her voice thick with rehearsed sorrow the second I answered. "Sweetheart, you're being unfair. We've always been there for you in our own way. You know how much pressure we're under. We couldn't drop everything that night. Your father had work. Your sister had the children. Life doesn't just stop." Her words poured through the receiver like syrup, sticky and suffocating. And for a moment I closed my eyes, remembering every time she'd told me I was selfish for asking the smallest thing. I listened, quiet, until she slipped in what she really wanted. "But this file you sent, it makes us look so bad. Your father's business partners have seen it. Do you realize what you've done to his reputation?" There it was. Not a single word about me almost dying on the side of the road. Not even a question about whether I was healing. Only worry about their image. I let her finish. Then I said in a voice steady enough to scare even myself, "I almost bled out. Waiting for you. And you're worried about reputation. That's the difference between us. I care about people. You care about appearances." She tried to backpedal, but I didn't let her. "I want you to understand something," I continued. "That file was never meant to ruin you. It was meant to remind you, to show you what I've given, over and over, while you gave me nothing. And now, it's done. I won't give you one more favor, one more dollar, one more hour of my life. You're cut off." There was silence, just her breathing unevenly on the other end. I almost expected tears, maybe rage. Instead, she whispered bitterly, "You'll regret this. Family is all you have." And then she hung up. I set the phone down carefully, my ribs aching as I exhaled, and realized how wrong she was. Family wasn't all I had. Not anymore. I had my own strength now, the kind that came from seeing the truth and refusing to look away. They could spin their stories, cry their crocodile tears, protect their reputations. None of it mattered. Because I had finally done the one thing they never expected. I chose myself, and that choice was irreversible. Word spread quickly after that. A cousin texted me out of the blue, trying to play mediator, saying things like, "I'm sure they meant well," and "Don't burn bridges you might need later." I read it twice, shaking my head at how transparent it was. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about the ripple effect of me standing up for myself. At work, one of my father's colleagues approached me in the hallway, eyebrows raised. He says you're exaggerating what happened, that you're emotional. The word hung there like an insult. I smiled politely, but inside, I burned. "Funny," I said, "because broken ribs don't feel like an exaggeration." The colleague looked uncomfortable and walked away. It was clear my family had already started damage control, rewriting the story so they wouldn't look like the villains. But here's what they didn't count on. I had the receipts, the timestamps, the medical records, the police report. I wasn't telling a story. I was stating facts. And the more they tried to twist the narrative, the more people began to question them instead of me. My sister sent another barrage of messages late one night, long paragraphs about how she couldn't sleep because she missed me, about how kids need their aunt, and about how I was breaking the family apart. I read every word in silence, then deleted the thread without replying. I wasn't breaking the family apart. I was simply refusing to carry it anymore. And as painful as that truth was, it also gave me strength, because I could feel them losing control of me, and with every call I ignored, every guilt trip I rejected, I was gaining something they could never take back: my freedom. By the end of the month, their desperation had shifted into anger. My father sent me a letter, not handwritten, but typed, cold, stamped with his company's logo at the top as though I were just another client he needed to discipline. In it, he accused me of defaming the family, of airing private matters that could harm his business, and even threatened to consult a lawyer if I didn't retract everything. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter spread out before me, and laughed. The kind of bitter laugh that comes when someone proves your worst suspicions exactly right. They hadn't cared about my body broken in the wreck, hadn't cared about the nights I spent alone in that hospital room, but the second their money and reputation were on the line, suddenly I was worth acknowledging. I took a photo of the letter, saved it in my growing archive, then filed the original neatly away. If he wanted a legal fight, I was ready. I had every receipt, every bank transfer, every text begging me to bail them out. And most importantly, I had the truth of that night, the reports from the paramedics and the hospital staff who documented how long I waited alone for a family that never came. I didn't reply to his letter. Silence was louder. Instead, I turned my energy towards something better: rebuilding. I reached out to friends I had neglected while running to put out my family's endless fires. I reconnected with people who had once cared about me without conditions. Slowly, I started filling my life with voices that lifted me up instead of dragging me down. And though the ache of betrayal never fully left, it started to feel less like a wound and more like a scar. Evidence that I had survived. Weeks turned into months, and my family's attempts to pull me back grew more frantic, more manipulative, more hollow. First came the guilt-laced phone calls I refused to answer. Then the sudden packages on my doorstep: flowers, gift baskets, even a note from my sister written in shaky handwriting that said, "We all make mistakes. Don't let this tear us apart." But the truth was, it wasn't one mistake. It was a lifetime of me showing up while they stayed seated, of me sacrificing, while they took, of me bleeding, sometimes literally, while they looked the other way. The crash had only ripped the mask off. Their absence that night was the clearest expression of what I had always been to them: useful, but disposable. And once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I remember one particular evening, scrolling through old photos, birthday parties where I was the one behind the camera, family dinners where I was the one serving, vacations where I was the one carrying bags, booking flights, making sure everyone else was comfortable. In picture after picture, I was there, but always in the background, never the one celebrated, never the one cared for. That realization settled into my bones heavier than the metal in my healing ribs. They had built a family dynamic where I was invisible unless needed, and when I needed them, I became non-existent. So I made a choice I never thought I'd have the strength to make. I started over. I blocked their numbers permanently. I moved apartments, changed locks, switched emails. I even closed the shared accounts I'd once stupidly opened with my father, transferring what was rightfully mine and leaving a paper trail so clean no lawyer could twist it. The silence that followed was deafening at first. No buzzing phone, no constant demands, no guilt dripping through every message. But slowly, that silence transformed into peace. I began waking up without the dread of wondering what crisis I'd have to fix for them next. I started living for myself, making choices that weren't dictated by fear of their judgment. And with every day that passed, I grew lighter, stronger, freer. People often say that family is forever, but I learned the harder truth. Family isn't about blood, it's about presence. And sometimes, the most radical act of self-love is realizing that letting go isn't betrayal. It's survival. It's been a year now since that night on the roadside, and I still remember the way the cold air stung my lungs as I waited for headlights that never came. I remember the paramedic's hand on mine, the quiet pity in his eyes when he realized my family wasn't showing up. That memory used to hollow me out, but now it feels like the moment everything shifted. The moment I stopped confusing obligation with love. My family hasn't changed. I hear through the grapevine that they still complain, still twist the story, still tell anyone who will listen that I abandoned them. Not the other way around. But the difference is that their words no longer have claws. They bounce off me like pebbles against steel. Because I know the truth, and I carry it with me like armor. In this year of silence, I've built something they can't touch. I've surrounded myself with people who call just to check in, who show up without being asked, who don't measure my worth in favors or bank transfers. I've learned to sit with peace, to wake up in a home that feels like mine, to walk into a room without wondering who I need to shrink myself for. The scar on my forehead is faint now, but every time I see it in the mirror, it reminds me of the night I was forced to choose. Keep bleeding for people who would never show up, or finally, close the door. I chose the door, and behind it I found myself. So no, I don't regret sending that file, or cutting them off, or refusing to answer when they begged me to reconsider. I don't regret choosing silence over chaos, peace over guilt, freedom over blood. If anything, I regret not doing it sooner. Because the truth is, sometimes family isn't who shares your last name. It's who shows up when you're broken and bleeding on the side of the road. And once you learn that, you'll never settle for less again. I know I won't.